Okay, where we left off, we were talking about artificial selection. Darwin had studied this personally, spending a lot of time corresponding with fancy pigeon breeders and himself raising some rather strange looking breeds of fancy pigeon and crossbreeding them and doing various experiments and satisfying himself that artificial selection worked in much the same way that natural selection does, and that individual human breeders working over many generations by picking out members of any population of living things that had traits that they liked, letting those individuals breed and getting rid of the rest could shape a species almost without limit. And I know I showed you folks the pigeons. I showed you corn, which started out as a humble little Mexican grass with maybe a dozen seeds on it. And over the past 10,000 years or so, has been shaped into the 300 varieties of corn that we have now. I'll give you one more just for the heck of it. This is a plant that's native to northern Mexico and the southwestern United States. It's called the chiltepin, and it's a little bush, and it's got bright red berries. The berries are normally eaten by birds, and the birds will eat the berries and then poop the seeds out. And that's how the chiltepin spreads. The birds get a meal, and the seeds get transported, and they get a little package of fertilizer when when they're planted. Birds like the taste, but chiltepin berries are very irritating to mammals. They cause a severe pain response in the mouth. And something on the order of 10,000 years ago is when the first humans made it to that part of North America, the first Native Americans. And evidently, some of them tried eating chiltepin berries. And so I envision a whole group of them eating chiltepin berries. And after about 15 minutes of screaming and desperately looking for cold water to soothe the savage burning taste in the mouth, one of them looked at the others and said, "Hey, that was fun. Let's do it again." So a bunch of very early Native American masochists started growing chiltepin bushes that had more berries than others. They would save seeds from those and plant them. Bushes that didn't give as many berries, they didn't bother with. They might pull those up by the roots. Bushes that had bigger berries, bushes that had better tasting berries, bushes that didn't cause agony in the mouth quite as badly as wild chiltepines do. All of those might be saved and allowed to reproduce and produce the next generation of chiltepin plants. And after 10,000 years, we have this. These are a few of the hundreds of descendants of the wild chiltepin plant. Up there at the top left, those are bell peppers, various colors, and of course, no heat at all. Bell peppers don't burn your mouth. Top right, those are used in Mexican cooking. Those are chiles poblanos. If you get the chile relleno at a Mexican restaurant, it's going to be that type of pepper. Down at the lower left, those very elongated red peppers are cayennes. The lower right, those purple and orange ones are mostly grown for as ornamentals, although you can eat them. Those are called aurora peppers, grown for their distinctive color. The peppers that are used to make paprika, jalapeno peppers, and serrano peppers. Most of the domesticated peppers that you eat, with the exception of habaneros and some South American species like ají, peppers, which they use in places like Peru. Aside from those, all domestic peppers that you know are descended from the chiltepin. People still grow chiltepines that look like this, and the little pepper berries are so hot they are affectionately known as gringo killers, because just a couple of these in your chili will, set your mouth on fire. They're very spicy. But from that beginning, we have all of these, including plants that are so different that if you didn't already know they were peppers, you might not guess that they belong together. And it happened by artificial selection, by generations of people picking out individuals that varied in ways that they liked and getting rid of individuals that didn't vary. So in artificial selection, individuals vary. As we said, we don't yet, well, we know, but I haven't yet covered how or why they vary, what makes them vary. It doesn't matter just yet. What matters is that they do. Individuals are different, and human breeders select the individuals that vary in ways that they desire. Cows that give more milk, peppers that don't cause your entire digestive system to catch on fire, corn plants that you don't have to crack the husk on the seeds, pigeons that look unusually fluffy and funny and cool and weird, cats with curly ears. Humans pick out the individuals that they like, and those are the ones that are encouraged to breed. In natural selection, individuals vary, but humans don't do the selecting. The environment that the species are in can be thought of as doing the selecting. Some individuals vary in ways that give them better odds of not only surviving, but of reproducing in the environment where they happen to be. Those will leave more offspring just like themselves. Other individuals vary in ways that decrease the odds that they will survive and reproduce. And those individuals, on average, will leave fewer offspring, or possibly none. This is sometimes summed up with the phrase that you've probably heard, survival of the fittest. And I absolutely hate that phrase and start twitching uncontrollably when I hear it. One reason is that Darwin didn't actually say it. It was coined by a Victorian philosopher named Herbert Spencer, who is definitely a contender for most boring human being in history. And it was part of his own philosophical system, and he had his own axes to grind. The other thing is that fitness and evolution, the fittest are not the meanest. If I say survival of the fittest, you're likely to think about, some, pride of lions savagely, ruthlessly preying upon the weakest of the herd of antelope or whatever it is, or, a savage great white shark, slaughtering the weakest and the sickest and the slowest of the helpless tuna, or whatever it is that they've got on Animal Planet that tends to draw the viewers. I'm not going to say that real fitness doesn't necessarily mean that, but the fittest are not necessarily the meanest. The fittest might be the ones that run away the quickest. The fittest might be the ones that just grow the fastest. The fittest might be the ones that hide the best. And as we'll see at the very end of this course, very, 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 like, oh my God, very often, the fittest can be the most cooperative. There is nothing in evolutionary biology that you could possibly twist into a statement along the lines of only the ruthless and savage survive. It is much more complicated than that. And very often being the most savage is not the best strategy to use for a species that's trying to persist in its environment.
Mr. Wagoner?
Yes.
Angel said she's still in the waiting room.
Oh, okay. Half a tick. Okay, let me. Okay, I can't see her. Check and see if she's not using the older web address for this Zoom meet. I thought I had gotten rid of it. I may not have, but I'm not seeing her on my list of participants, I'm afraid. Yeah, do. Okay. Yeah, just make sure you send her the current URL, because she might be in the wrong place, because I don't see her at all. Sorry about that. Okay, anything else? Okay, something in the chat. Okay, there she is. Okay, there we go. Greet her for me. By the way, somebody call time. I can't see a clock at the moment from where I am, so if somebody could please call time at about 10:45, and I'll know to wrap it up. That would be just groovy. Thank you. Okay, a few small scale examples of this in action. Every state has reported cases of head lice. This is a head louse, by the way. If you've had kids going to school, this is the kind of thing that sometimes spreads in schools and daycare centers and places like that. The most common over-the-counter treatment for head lice is shampoo containing insecticides called pyrethroids. Super lice aren't killed by pyrethroids. Why are we seeing this? Well, lice vary in their susceptibility to pyrethroids. You know, some lice are killed by it very quickly, and some just happen to be a little bit more tolerant. You know, just like people vary in their susceptibility to things like alcohol or drugs or, you know, medicines. So if you've got a whole bunch of lice on your head and you shampoo with pyrethroids, that might kill all of them. It might kill almost all of them, but maybe there will be one, maybe just one, that happens to be able to resist the pyrethroids. And if that one survives and it lays eggs, or maybe if two survive and they mate and lay eggs, then the offspring are going to inherit their parents' resistance to pyrethroids. If that happens over several generations, you might get an entire variety of lice that are all resistant to pyrethroids. Another example that's taken place only within the past 150 years, the mining industry leaves behind big mounds of crushed rock that's been crushed to extract the metal. Exactly how varies depending on what you're mining for and what kind of ore you've got and so on. But a lot of mining operations leave these mounds of crushed rock that in some cases may be contaminated with things like mercury and cadmium and things like that, heavy metals that are very toxic. So let's say you have a big mound of crushed rock that's full of heavy metal, heavy metal. Grass seeds are going to blow onto that mound of crushed rock, or maybe get washed there or something like that. They'll spread the way any weed or grass does. Maybe the vast majority of those seeds are going to get killed by the heavy metals, but grasses vary in their ability to tolerate heavy metal. And so eventually one seed is going to fall on there and the plant's not going to be killed and the plant will grow. Maybe not very well, but it will still survive. It'll reproduce. Some of its offspring will also be able to grow, and maybe some of them will grow a little better than the parent did. Repeat over many generations, and you've got grasses that can grow in heavy metal contaminated soil. These are some grasses in Britain growing on old mining waste about 50 years ago. Big one is resistance to herbicides and pesticides. Okay, mosquitoes transmit malaria, which is a very severe disease. And beginning in, I think, the 1940s, many countries started controlling mosquitoes by spraying DDT, an insecticide. How do you spell that? Okay, it's dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane, but we can just say DDT. It's a powerful insecticide. We don't use DDT now, and one reason you'll find out towards the end of the course, it tends to build up in the environment and have very bad effects on critters like birds of prey. It's a reason why the bald eagle was highly endangered at one time in all of the United States except for Alaska. DDT was causing severe population loss. We'll talk about why that is much later. The other reason is that mosquitoes rapidly evolved resistance to it. Let's say you spray a pond with DDT and it might kill 99.9% of the mosquitoes, but one of them might just happen to vary in some way, some internal feature of its metabolism, that it is a bit more resistant to DDT than everybody else. And this mosquito survives and flies off singing Taylor Swift, singing "I'm Just Gonna Shake It Off." If that mosquito manages to breed, that mosquito will have offspring, and some of those offspring will inherit that their parents' ability to resist DDT. Okay, so then you've got mosquitoes that resist DDT. You might spray more DDT, and that might kill most of your resistant mosquitoes, but a few might be even more resistant. And so you keep having to use more and more DDT, and it's got less and less effect. So there's some data from India. In 1959, if you sprayed 4% DDT on mosquitoes and left it there for an hour, you'd kill more than 95% of the mosquitoes. Less than 2 years later, you were killing only about 20% of the mosquitoes. 80% of mosquitoes in India were DDT resistant. The same thing happens using pesticides to kill weeds in farm fields. There's more and more, weeds that you don't want in your soybeans or your cotton or whatever it is that you're growing that can resist pesticides. So farmers have to keep buying more and more pesticides, use larger and larger doses. That's potentially increasingly dangerous, and it works less and less well because the weeds that they're trying to kill are evolving resistance. This even happens with bacteria. If you've got bacteria making you sick and you take antibiotics, it might wipe out almost every one of them. But if there's a couple, maybe even just one, that resist just a little bit, those bacteria might survive, especially if you don't take the full course of antibiotics. They're likelier to survive, and they'll grow back, and their offspring will inherit that ability to resist the antibiotic. We have bacteria now that can eat penicillin. not just resist it, but can use it for food. And we now have disease-causing strains of bacteria that can resist almost all of the antibiotics that we can throw at them. MRSA is one you might have heard of, multi-drug resistant Staphylococcus aureus. There are strains of tuberculosis now. That's a disease you almost never hear of, although it used to be one of the big killers, and it may yet one day be again. Because we have multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, and we don't have many things that can stop that. And that's simply a result of natural selection. People didn't deliberately set out to breed antibiotic resistant bacteria. It just happens. One last one. Those are some fungi. You can see the hyphae. Remember those filaments made up of cells one after the other. You can also see some spores. You might notice that the hyphae look a little bit dark, and that's because they produce a black pigment. These fungi were found growing in and around the Chernobyl nuclear reactor in the Ukraine. Most of you may not remember this, but this was big news. This was a nuclear reactor that melted down in 1986. I mean, literally, the core of the nuclear reactor melted and flowed into a puddle and burned its way into the basement. People died trying to stop it. An entire town had to be evacuated. The whole area around the town has been abandoned. It was a real man-made disaster. And now there's fungi growing inside the old reactor, which people can now enter with protective gear. And the dark pigment that these fungi make not only absorbs and blocks gamma radiation, the most dangerous type of radioactive energy, but it's able to harness it and use it as a source of energy. Plants do photosynthesis and soak up light to power their metabolism. These fungi grow towards sources of radiation the same way that plants grow towards light. They grow faster with radiation than without. And we know that that's happened at some time after the year 1986. That wasn't that long ago. I was a junior in high school. It wasn't that long ago. Please tell me it wasn't that long ago. It's only, what, not quite 40 years. How did this come to be? Well, there's fungal spores just about everywhere. Radiation would have killed almost all of them, but there might have been just a few that just so happened to be a little better than the others at resisting radioactivity. Those are the ones that are going to sprout and make hyphae. Maybe they're not going to grow really well as first, but they'll keep reproducing. And in every generation, the fungi that can resist radioactivity the best are the ones that are going to survive, grow, and reproduce. Wash, rinse, and repeat for many generations. And in the course of less than 40 years, we've got fungi that not only resist radioactivity, they can eat it. This is like if the Incredible Hulk were a fungus, this would be it. Right? Remember, Bruce Banner gets turned into the Hulk by too much gamma radiation? Well, there you go. This is the Incredible Hulk fungus. The Incredible Hypha. The Incredible Mycelium. There we go. So that's the difference between natural and artificial selection. There's a third type that Darwin studied, and it's called sexual selection. Individuals vary. That's what all of this starts with. And in this case, those individuals whose traits are preferred by the opposite sex have a better chance of reproducing. So there are some traits that may not give a living thing an advantage in survival. In fact, sometimes they might seem to cause a disadvantage to survival, but members of the opposite sex really like those traits. So if you've got those attractive traits, you're likelier to make babies than if you don't. And the babies will carry those attractive traits just like you do, because genetics. In some cases, the traits are sound signals. Birds in particular, if you're a male bird, one of the ways you attract females is by song, and singing the right type of song and singing it more loudly, singing it more clearly is going to get you mates, whereas not singing well and not singing loudly will not get you mates, and you won't leave offspring. I saw a cartoon once where somebody had translated what the birds are really saying when they sing. And you saw a bunch of birds sitting on trees singing, hey, baby, hey, baby, hey, baby. And of course, they were also singing, males were singing to each other, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, you and what army? You and what army? Back off, buddy, back off, buddy. Hey, baby, hey, baby. Yeah, bird song sounds really beautiful, but it's basically, a tree full of birds is basically the world's sleaziest meat market bar, because the females are picking out males with the brightest and clearest songs, and the males are challenging each other and trying to attract the females. So the male birds are basically asking everybody for their number. They might not be sound, they might be visual signals. You see these guys in summer, usually up on telephone wires in my neighborhood. This is a scissor-tailed flycatcher. And you can see it's got this really long tail. And if you drive around, outside of town a little bit, pretty much anywhere in this part of the country, you'll see males. And they're pretty distinctive because they not only have these long tails, but they'll jump off the wire and they'll do these acrobatics, these loop-the-loops. And what they're doing is showing off. Males with the longest tails and the most spectacular aerobatic dance moves, those are the ones that are going to get the lady flycatchers. Male flycatchers with short tails, male flycatchers that can't fly acrobatically, those are the ones that end up doing the bird equivalent of living in mom's basement and playing video games all the time. Males with the right moves and the long feathers are the ones that, get the chicks. They could be visual signals. This is an Australian peacock spider. Actual size is less than half an inch. They're not very big, but the males have these brilliantly colored abdomens. You can see this one's iridescent blue with these red markings. And when the males want to attract females, they'll get up and do this dance. You see those legs that are sticking out that are dark with the white tips. They start moving those legs, almost looking like they're dancing the robot, and sticking their abdomens up in the air and shaking them back and forth. So they've got these brilliantly colored butts and this amazing twerking dance that they do. And males with brilliant butts who, shake it but don't break it are the ones that the females pick. Males with drab butts that don't have the moves, they don't leave any babies. So that's how sexual selection works. This might raise the question as to why certain traits are favored. Why should a female bird prefer to mate with a male with bright colors? Why do the female cardinals that I see outside my window from time to time prefer to go with the brightest red males? What's so great about being red? Why should female Australian jumping spiders prefer to mate with the males that have the most garishly colored behinds. What is it about these traits? There's no single answer to that. It actually takes me about a week to cover this in the upper division evolution class that I teach. But in many cases, there are certain traits that are indicators of quality, meaning that if you pick a mate with these traits, your babies are going to be stronger and likelier to survive. This is a case study. This is a small fish. There are some populations that can live in the ocean, but there's others that have moved up into lakes and rivers on both the Atlantic and the Pacific coasts of the United States and Canada. I don't think we get them here. They've been studied a lot in places like British Columbia, Canada, but we would get these up in the Northeast and the Northwest US. They're called sticklebacks. If you look very carefully, you can see that they've got little spines on their back, hence the name. And what you're looking at in this picture is a female surrounded by two males. And you'll notice that the males have bright red on the face, the underside of the head, and you can't see it really clearly at this angle, but they've also got red on their bellies. And when a male stickleback feels like he needs female companionship, he starts doing what's called the head standing dance, in which he will turn himself so his head is down and his tail is up, and he will start wiggling his red belly for all he's worth. And if a female comes along and likes the way that he shakes that thing, the female will go down with him to a nest that he's built on the bottom of the lake. She'll lay her eggs in it. He will fertilize the eggs, and then he will do all of the child care until the babies are big enough to fend for themselves. Sticklebacks are good dads. Why should female sticklebacks like to hang out with males that have bright red bellies? What is so great about a red belly? There's some data. I can't remember the name of the scientist who did this, but he looked at a stickleback population and measured how much of each stickleback's body was covered with red pigment. And this is ranked on a scale where the lowest is about 0.1, the highest is more than 0.3. I think that's just the percent of the body that's covered with red. What he found was that if a male had lots of red, the babies were more resistant to parasites, a parasite called a tapeworm, which is easy to count because these tapeworms make little black specks appear on the bodies of an infected fish. So if you're a female, you don't have to think about this. Fish don't really think, they can't plan this sort of thing the way that we might. But if you're a female and you're born with a tendency to like bright red males, you'll breed with bright red males. You'll have offspring that inherit that bright red color, and those offspring are also more resistant to parasites. They're more resistant to something that would make them sick. If you're a female and you're not attracted to bright red, then you mate with a drab male, your babies are going to be sicker because they're going to be more infected with parasites, and more of them may die, or at least not be able to reproduce as well because they're sick. So it doesn't always work this way, but in this case, red bellies are not just random. Red bellies are a sign that a mate is not only healthy, but can transmit that healthiness to his offspring. So again, the female sticklebacks aren't thinking this through. They're not thinking, ooh, I really want a good dad for my kids. Hey, there's a really bright red male. They're not thinking like this. They're acting purely on instinct. but females that have an instinct to go after males with bright red bellies have more surviving offspring than females that don't care about bright red bellies. So there's a logic to why certain traits are sexually selected and others are not. This has been found for a lot of bright red colors in a number of species, not humans, obviously, but in a number of species, bright red and yellow colors are often signals of overall good health and good immune systems. So that's, we think, why a lot of species, females of one, tend to like bright red, orange, or yellow males.
Dr. Wagner, it's 10:45.
Okay. Let me just add that I've talked about it as if it's always females that are choosing males with bright colors or loud songs or something like that. It can be that way. It often is, but there's a number of exceptions. Sometimes it is the females that are brightly colored and the males that are choosy. I can think of several bird species that do this. I can't think of any that you'd be likely to know. There are species where it's a lot more complicated than one sex being choosy and the other one being brightly colored and displaying. Sometimes both sexes might be choosy or both sexes might display. It's much more complicated than this simplified model that I've given you. But that's basically, that gives you some idea of how sexual selection works. And it too, like natural selection, can cause a species to change from one generation to the next over many generations. I tell you what, by the power vested in me by the state of Arkansas, okay, that's actually a pretty good place to stop and pick up the rest on Wednesday. We're a little bit ahead of where I thought we were going to be. So what I'm going to cover on Wednesday is an answer to the question, okay, selection can cause change, but can it really cause new species to appear? And I'm going to talk a lot about my favorite fish. And right. And I will also, as soon as the appropriate button to stop it comes up, there, I will stop the recording. And I will stop recording now. We're done.